to set up his piece?
Tom will do. There's certainly a movement these days towards plays with social relevance and issues. This has none of that. It's just reading from a little pricey. This drawing room comedy takes place in 1935 at the country house of the 7th Viscount Tuxford, where Winston Stanley must solve a double problem to secure his future while dealing with the rapier wit of his mother and sister. And the four people, this is all very near the beginning of the play. It answers one question immediately, which you don't see. He talks about buying a glass elephant in Prague on a visit there. And he gave it to his mother it was on the mantle, but it was smashed into 1,000 pieces by Aunt Gwendolyn's grandchildren. However, there's possibly another meaning to the title, but you'll have to figure that out. But this is the very close to the beginning. And so there's Winston, who's about 33, his sister Sophie, who's about 30, her husband Victor, who's also about that age, and then Penelope, the mother, Winston's mother, who's in her mid-50s. And this is, as I say, an English drawing room comedy. First act, second act, and the epilogue all take place in the day sitting room of the home of the Stanleys at Tuxford House. That's it.
All right. Go ahead whenever you want. Stage directions.
An Elephant from Prague. At Rise, we see a spacious, discreetly elegant drawing room. Winston is talking to a somewhat younger couple as the 50-ish Penelope Stanley enters carrying a full tea tray, which she proceeds to set on a small table, thence to serve the others.
Yep, there we go. All right, sorry. I might have found something useful to do if Ian hadn't run off and got himself killed in the war.
Oh, Winston, please don't bring up Ian. It's very hurtful, and it's been 17 years.
Sophie has told me about Ian, a lot about Ian.
Well, why shouldn't I? He was my big brother, and I idolized him. He was such a natural leader.
Sophie says our little Albert looks a lot like him.
Actually, Mother, I might have been more careful if I'd known it would be you bringing the tea. What happened to Geraldine?
Albert decided he wanted a very late lunch, so she's busy with that.
I do wish he'd spent some time with his namesake.
He came to your wedding, and that would seem to be that.
After Aunt Gwendolyn's visit, how long ago was that? He doesn't really want children in his house. He's afraid they'll break things.
Oh, I'm afraid the poor dear doesn't realize all the really nice things were broken years ago. And if truth be told, he doesn't really like any of you either. That's why he mostly stays up in his room.
I suppose we could leave.
Oh, Victor, dear, that wouldn't make any difference. He's very set in his ways.
He did like Ian.
You're bringing that up again.
I'm his mother, why, so I have a right to. We had such hopes for him, but he wanted to do the patriotic thing and take his gap year to fight the Hun. Then the gap closed and we never saw him again.
It was a closed casket.
Don't be morbid, dear.
So when do we get to meet your guest? He seems a little mysterious.
That's only because the train was delayed and then it was far too late for introductions. He slept in a little, then wanted to go out for some exercise, and now he's cleaning up. You wouldn't want him to come in here all sweaty, would you?
That might be interesting.
Oh, Sophie, don't be rude, particularly with your husband here.
What did she say?
Maybe it's best that Geraldine is not here.
Oh, Winston, there's very little in this family that Geraldine does not know about. It's getting harder to find good staff, you know. They have to be competent and discreet. You'll find that out for yourself someday.
When you're the 8th Viscount Tuxford, of course, but by that time you'll be married, and no doubt your wife can hire the staff.
Of course.
Whatever happened to that young woman you told me about, the one you met in London?
I meet a lot of women in London.
No doubt. But this one had a job, something with words. Was it a newspaper?
Ah, yes, the literary researcher. That would be Eleanor Hinchcliffe.
What exactly does that involve?
I wouldn't say I'm involved with her.
I meant the job.
Oh, well, as I understand it, a literary researcher, at least this one, gets paid to dig up new facts and put them in a current article so that the writer looks smarter than he is.
I understand that such positions are usually held by women, since they get paid so much less than men.
Now, dear, don't be radical. We all know what polite society expects and demands.
I never thought of Sophie as particularly radical. Bossy, yes, but not radical.
I don't find her bossy.
You wouldn't, dear, otherwise you wouldn't have married her.
Sometimes you have to be bossy with children.
I tried to avoid that, which may have been a mistake. I hope you all like duck, because that's what we're having for dinner. I've told Hooper to set the table for 6.
6? Is Father joining us?
Of course not, dear, but I'm sure David will be here by then.
David? Why didn't I know about that?
Why should you, dear? He's my son, and you've always treated him like a child.
Well, he is a child, sort of.
My brother resists the thought that someone else could inherit the title, such as it is.
Over my dead body.
Exactly.
When the war broke out, Albert and I discussed what the consequences might be. Chief among them being that many men would die. So to help the next generation, David became our little war effort.
So patriotic.
Winston was already off to school, so he hardly knew David. But I was only 10, so we got along quite well.
What's he studying at university? I don't believe anyone has said.
We have not. I think it's law or finance or something like that.
Mother, those are not at all related.
Why don't we just ask him when he gets here? With any luck, that should keep us going until at least the duck.
Winston, dear, you should tell us how you met this fellow, whatever his name is.
It's Karol Holichek, and I met him in Prague. He was selling on the Charles Bridge.
Sophie spits her tea.
Can I help?
Winston likes to travel, so every so often I have to send him money. It seems by this time he's almost got a route, like he was delivering milk.
That's true. The summer of 1925 was a wonderful time to start discovering Europe. Everything had pretty much settled down after the war. At first I thought of going to Paris, but it seemed everyone else had the same idea, particularly those Americans. So I took a left turn and started in Amsterdam. Eventually I made my way over to Berlin, and from there it's kind of a straight line through Prague to Vienna. Then you see all the mountains and go back to Zurich, and from there it's just Paris and home.
Don't you have to take a lot of baggage for a trip like that?
Not really, I travel light.
And you make it a point to stay at hotels that will do your clothes for you.
True, although sometimes at night I go down to the riverbank and beat my clothes against the rocks.
I had no idea you could do laundry.
Oh, Mother, he's just having fun at your expense.
Isn't that the point? To have fun at someone else's expense?
I knew I should have been bossier.
Would it have made a difference?
That's a point. But again, how did you meet this man?
It was actually on my second trip to Prague. One must always make a stop at the Charles Bridge because there are all sorts of people selling all sorts of things. They particularly like the English tourists because they think we'll buy up anything. So I was walking along and came upon this display of glass figurines, mostly animals, and I was very impressed. Although I was later to learn that in Prague, glass blowing is a fairly common art, and to them it's like milking a cow is to us.
I've never actually milked a cow.
Go on, dear.
So I was looking at the figurines. In fact, I'd been walking along looking at the merchandise rather than the people because it was all so interesting. And of course, I wouldn't have known anyone I might have seen.
You always travel alone?
On my grand tour, I do. There are just so many things going on and too many places for any two people to have exactly the same interests. So I try to stay flexible.
In case you might want to take a side trip or you meet a special person.
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but yes, the point is to stay flexible. Anyway, at this one stall, I saw this darling little glass elephant. And as I was telling Victor earlier, I don't know why it came to mind, I thought I might buy it. So then I looked up at the fellow attending the stall, and it turned out to be Carol. His English was quite good, and we arrived at a price rather quickly, and that was that. Although I returned later in the day when he was closing up and suggested it might be fun to sip some absinthe together.
I thought it was difficult to get absinthe.
Not in Prague. It turned out that we got on quite well, but then the next day I was off to Vienna with a promise to stop by on my next trip.
That was the elephant I had over the fireplace in the dining room. I don't know where it is now.
I believe my first cousins, once removed, smashed it into 1,000 pieces. Gwendolyn's grandchildren.
Oh, I suppose you're right.
Doesn't care about it at all.
Actually, I had somewhat similar experience when I was visiting Brussels, you know, in the old medieval square. I think they call it the Grand Place. There was a vendor selling little statues which were really corkscrews in the shape of the statue, the mannequin piss, except there was a corkscrew where his penis should be. At first, he wanted a very high price, in Belgian francs, of course, but fortunately, I knew the exchange rate and I was able to get him down to a reasonable sum. I still have that corkscrew.
I'm afraid no one cares, dear.
But we do appreciate your attempt to contribute to the conversation. Would anyone like more tea?
And that's that.
Yay.
It develops. David
Sweetie.
and Carl arrive and fun stuff happens.
Fun
Well,
stuff.
We'll be doing the full version of that a week from Saturday on the 26th for the 2:30 reading. I'll be posting the cast list later this evening. If you
Sweet.
so
Oh,
I've
thank
got
you.
that one cast. I just need a few more people for Dave's script, which we'll hear at the end here. Do you guys have any questions for Tom?
Just get to meet the family.
Can you tell us a little bit more? I mean, you said fun stuff happens. Can you give us a little more than that?
Well, again, it's all in the drawing room, and David arrives. Carl arrives. Carl is there, sorry. And then David arrives, and they get to know each other. And as mentioned, Winston has to solve a double problem. It develops in the first act that Albert, the current Lord, that nobody ever sees because he's always upstairs, has said that Winston has to be married by the end of the year or the inheritance goes to somebody else. So he has to actually, this Carl, whom we met in Prague, turns out kind of to be his boyfriend. However, he has to get rid of Carl now, and then later we meet Eleanor Hinchcliffe, and they come to an agreement, as many upper class English people would, for marriage and children, and that plays itself out to the epilogue 22 years after the main action occurs.
Wow. Sounds good.
So
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
all of the action.
Dialogue. It's very very
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
like it. Good, really good.
Thank you.
It's witty repartee.
And I tried. Well, the set doesn't move, but the situation of the characters does, which is to say, you see everything happening on stage, how they evolve, rather than it happening off stage or something like that.
Hello.
So that's that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun.
It's a fun script. I
Yeah.
think everyone would enjoy
It
it.
is. It's very fun. Yeah.
Some very funny lines.
Mhm.
Nobody really cares, Dolly.
Never know, Howard.
Very
Yeah.
dry British humor, but you captured it very well in your dialogue.
Hmm.
Actually, it was 50 years ago. I sat right almost next to Noel Coward in a theater balcony in London, but he did not recognize me.
PE, have you performed this before with live actors?
No, this started with Dramatists Guild had a thing called End of Play, which started in this February, to be, you were supposed to complete a play during March. And so it wasn't a contest, it was to get to do something. And I attended a session in February in Ann Arbor, and then, but later that week, it was a group event, and they had a silent auction. So guess what I had left over on my shelf? A glass elephant from Prague. So I donated that, and the next day, the title popped into my mind. I thought, should I get that elephant back? But then I did the first speech, which said the elephant had been broken, so I didn't need to have it. And then it just spun on, the story spun on from there.